Why are the people of Allah in their wadha'if? In order to raise their station with the living. I mean, that's the difference. So, taqwa is the foundation of the path to God. And some of them said it's 4 matters. Iqamat al-fara'id, it is to fulfill the obligations. Wajtinab al-maharim, I mean, that's what Ibn Ashir radiyallahu anhu says. وَحَسُرُ التَّقْوَ اجْتِنَابٌ وَامْتِثَالٌ فِي ظَاهِرٍ وَبَاطِنٍ بِذَا تُنَالٌ. That the summation of it is doing what Allah commanded you and avoiding what He prohibited you inwardly and outwardly. So that's what he's saying. It's doing the fara'id and avoiding the prohibitions. وَاتِّبَاعَ السُّنَّةِ, and to follow the sunnah. وَلُزُومَ الْأَدَبِ, because this is an important aspect. You see the adab. I mean, I'll give you an example. I was in a situation where somebody did something which was a gross breach of adab, and I mentioned that. It had to do with culture and the adat. I mean, for instance, in Arab culture, you do not walk up to a woman and propose to her. I mean, you just don't do it. Now, is there anything in Sharia that says you can't do that? I mean, does it say in Sharia it's haram to propose to a woman? No. It's actually mandub to propose to a woman. So where then does the adab come in? It comes in how you do the proposal. And that is part of the Sharia. And this is something a lot of, especially modern Muslims, I mean, that's a whole word in itself. Modern Muslim. Because modern Muslims have a whole other understanding of Islam, to the point that many of the early Muslims would pull out their hair if they saw the behavior, or worse. And I'll tell you a true story. I know a Moroccan man who was on a bus with, I mean, sharr al-bariya ma yudhik, like the Arabs say, the worst calamities are things that make you laugh. This man was on a bus, and the bus had all of these people from the desert, village people, living in the very pure people. I mean, I lived with them, I know. And they drove into Agadir for the first time, and they saw all of these tourists that were basically naked, and he said they all started screaming. And literally, they couldn't believe it. They just went into a total state. And he said it was one of the most powerful things, because he'd gotten used to it. But it was the first time they'd ever seen it, and they just went into this state like they thought it was some end of time. It was all something happened that was terrible. And they all started screaming. And he, for the first time, he told me he realized how enormous it was. So adab is something that we've completely lost. I mean, we really have forgotten about adab. Now, there's obviously, adab can go to another extreme, which is where you get into protocol. And that's a whole other problem, because it goes to the other extreme where the culture becomes so inundated with the particularities of adab that you no longer have freedom. I mean, you breach adab in the tradition. That's why I always stipulate with some of the ulama that I'm Amriki, Hamaji. You know, I'm just a primitive American. So you have to allow some leeway, because in the traditional Muslim world, if you spend time with the ulama, there's a real expectation of certain comportment, which is now only in places like Yemen and some places in Morocco, some places in Syria and Sudan and places. But it's been lost in a lot of places. I mean, people don't have that understanding anymore. I mean, if you read the early stories about the awe, I mean, I finished this edit of Imam ad-Dara'i's biography, who wrote Du'a Nasiri. And I'm going to tell you this is a true story, because I wrote it in the thing. We recorded the Du'a Nasiri in Fez, and we finished at about 1 in the morning. And nobody knew I was in Fez except these people. And somebody had given me $100 to give to somebody in Fez. And we went out, we had dinner, and it was about 3:30 in the morning, and we had to go to Tangiers. And as we were driving up the hill, I said to this man, Muhammad bin Nis, I said, you know, I have an amana, a trust for so-and-so, and I'm not going to be able to see him because we just had to leave so quick. We had a flight from Tangiers with Abdul Latif Whiteman. So I said, can you give it to him? And he said, Bismillah, yeah, I'll give it to him. Just as I said that, he said, Subhanallah, I think we just passed him. Right? It was 3:30 in the morning. So he said, go back. So we drove back, and he was standing in front of a white van without any windows. He didn't know I was in Fez. And he said, when he saw me, he said, Subhanallah. He said, we just finished a khatam of the Quran, and I made dua that I'd see you tonight. Now, we had just finished the dua al-Nasiri. He opened the door of the van. There was about 20 of his people in there, because they do khatam and dalail khirat, and they do a lot of things. And he went like this, Bismillah, and he went down, and they all broke into dua al-Nasiri. And they recited it from beginning to end. True story. Believe it or not, I don't care. So Allah does those things. I call that